The sharp snap of the lease envelope echoed when my grandson said, "We're renting out your room." Still, I folded the paper slowly, keeping my face calm while my pulse climbed. As the envelope crackled between my fingers, his voice filled the house like it already belonged to him. While that same paper warmed in my hands, I remembered rocking him to sleep in this very room. The same document he dismissed carried my signature and his mistake. That's when I decided he could rent rooms someday, just not out of the house I own. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence, it lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Ellie sat curled up in her favorite armchair, the warm afternoon light spilling across the room, casting a golden glow on the walls she had lived within for decades. The house was still, save for the quiet hum of the fan above her. She took a deep, slow breath, savoring the silence that wrapped around her like a blanket. This was her time, the time after the house had settled for the day, when everything was familiar and peaceful. But today something was off. Liam appeared in the doorway, his usual smile stretched thin, his hands shoved awkwardly into his pockets. There was a nervous energy about him, one that made Ellie raise an eyebrow. He stepped into the room and hesitated, like he was waiting for the right moment to say something. "Grandma," he began, his tone light but with an edge of uncertainty, "Rachel and I were talking, and we've decided we're going to rent out your room." Ellie's mind froze, her heart lurching in her chest. "Rent out my room?" The words didn't make sense at first. She stared at him, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Wait, what?" she managed, trying to gather her thoughts. She put the knitting she had been working on down carefully, her fingers trembling. This wasn't a decision, it was a statement that made her stomach churn. Liam didn't seem to notice her shock. He just shrugged, the words coming out too easily. "Yeah, it'll help with expenses. You don't really use the room anymore, right? It's a good way to make some extra cash." Her mind raced. It's a good way to make extra cash? This was her home, not a guest house. Her room where she had raised her family, where memories had taken root like the old oak tree outside. She didn't even have time to process what he had just said before Rachel's voice rang in from the kitchen, light and cheerful. "It's really just practical, Ellie. You're not using the room and we've been struggling with bills. The extra money will help everyone," Rachel chimed, almost as if Ellie should already agree. A cold knot tightened in Ellie's chest. Struggling with bills, she had helped them time and again when they had nowhere else to turn. Had they really been planning this behind her back? She had opened her home to them and now they were treating it as just another source of income. Ellie's thoughts swirled with disbelief. How could they think this was okay? Liam pressed on, as if reading her silence as confusion. "We've been thinking about it for a while, Grandma. It'll be for your own good. You don't need that room, and this way, we can all save some money." Ellie's discomfort deepened. She had always been supportive, always the one to offer help when it was needed. But now she realized something. They had assumed her compliance. They had assumed they could make these decisions without consulting her. This wasn't just about money, it was about control. "No," Ellie said, her voice firmer than she had expected, surprising even herself. She straightened in her chair, feeling a new resolve. "This is my home and I make the decisions here, not you." Liam blinked, taken aback. He had expected an easy agreement, not this resistance. "Grandma, it's for your own good," he tried again, a hint of frustration creeping into his tone. But Ellie wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was spinning, her heart pounding, but in that moment clarity cut through the fog. This wasn't a discussion, it was a decision made without me. She stood up slowly, deliberately, feeling the weight of the room shift. She wasn't going to let them take this from her, not without a fight. She wasn't a bystander in her own life. "Liam, Rachel," she said quietly, her voice unwavering, "this is my home, and I'm not giving it up." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. She could see the surprise in Liam's eyes, the flicker of hesitation that hadn't been there moments before. But Ellie didn't care. She knew what she had to do next. She was ready, and whatever came next, she wouldn't back down. Ellie closed the door softly behind her and leaned against it, the quiet of her bedroom a stark contrast to the storm swirling in her chest. The walls, once a comfort, now felt suffocating. Her heart was still pounding from the conversation with Leah. Em and Rachel, but her mind was a swirl of disbelief and frustration. How could they do this? She pressed her palms to her temples, trying to steady her thoughts. She had always been the one to give, to bend when her family needed her. But this felt different. Liam and Rachel had walked in and without a word of discussion made a decision about her life, about her home, as though it was theirs to control. The room, their plan to rent it out, it wasn't just a small matter. It was a violation of her space, of her autonomy. They think they can walk all over me, she thought bitterly. Ellie stepped away from the door, moving slowly to the small desk in the corner. Her fingers lightly brushed the stack of papers, the familiar weight of them anchoring her back to reality. There, beneath a few documents and old letters, was the one she needed, the deed to her house. Her gaze lingered on it for a moment, the memory of how hard she had fought for this place flooding back. She had built her life here, brick by brick, after Frank passed away. This house wasn't just four walls, it was everything. It was her past, her present, and her future, and no one, not even family, was going to take it from her. Her breath hitched as a thought solidified in her mind. I don't need to accept their decisions. The truth of it was like a sudden surge of strength. I can take control. Ellie reached for her phone. It felt heavier than usual, like the weight of the decision ahead was already pressing on her. She scrolled through her contacts until she found Paul's name. She had worked with him for years, trusted him, and now she needed him more than ever. She tapped the screen and waited for the familiar voice to answer. Ellie, Paul's voice came through, steady and calm. What's going on? You sound upset. Ellie swallowed, steadying herself. Paul, I need your help, she said, her voice tight but resolute. Liam and Rachel, they've decided to rent out my room. They're treating this house like it's just a resource, something they can manipulate for their own good. I don't know what to do. There was a pause on the line, then Paul spoke, his voice softer now but no less firm. Ellie, you don't have to let them do that. You have the legal right to decide what happens with your home. The house is yours. You can't let them push you around like this. The relief that washed over her was almost overwhelming. She had known this, of course. She had always known she owned the house. But hearing Paul confirm it, hearing him reassure her that she wasn't powerless, made the anger inside her settle into something more manageable: determination. I need you to prepare some documents, Ellie said, her voice gaining strength. Something that makes it clear they can't make decisions like this without me. I need to protect myself, Paul. I'll take care of it, Paul replied immediately. I'll draft up something that makes it clear the house is legally yours and they can't do this without your consent. But Ellie, be prepared. People don't always take kindly to having the power taken from them. Ellie's jaw tightened. She had spent so long bending to their needs, always trying to make things easier for everyone else. But now she saw things clearly. She had given enough. It was time to stand up for herself. Thank you, Paul, she said, the words simple but filled with an intensity that surprised her. Just make sure it's clear, I won't be bullied out of my own home. Paul chuckled softly. I know you won't. I'll get those documents ready, Ellie. Take care of yourself, okay? As she ended the call, Ellie felt a weight lift off her shoulders. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but now at least she had a plan. She wasn't just going to let Liam and Rachel take over her life. Her fingers brushed the edge of the deed again, and this time, instead of the panic she had felt earlier, a quiet confidence settled within her. The room, her home, her life, it was hers, and she would fight to keep it. Ellie stood up, straightening her shoulders. She wasn't sure what Liam and Rachel would do next, but one thing was clear: she wasn't backing down. Ellie sat down at her desk, the familiar scent of old paper and ink grounding her as she pulled the deed to the house from the drawer. The weight of it in her hands was both heavy and reassuring. She turned it over, tracing the embossed seal with her fingertips. The document that had once been just a piece of paper now felt like a symbol of her life, of everything she had fought for. The house had been more than just a place to live. It had been a lifeline after Frank passed away. When she'd inherited it, it had been little more than an empty shell, but she had made it hers. Every nail, every brushstroke of paint, every patch of the garden had been shaped by her hands. She had transformed it into a home full of love, laughter, and memories. She remembered the long nights after Frank's death, when she would sit in the living room alone, staring at the empty spaces, wondering how she would fill them. It had been so much more than just a house then. It had been her anchor. And over the years she had watched her children, then her grandchildren, come and go, always feeling that same grounding in the walls they shared. But now they were treating it as if it was a commodity, as if it were theirs to take or manipulate. Ellie's grip tightened on the deed. It's fully paid off, she thought. It's mine. She had never told her family just how much she had saved, how much she had put away over the years. To them, Ellie had always been the generous grandmother, the one who helped when they needed it, but she had kept the full extent of her financial independence a secret. Her fingers slowly traced the text, reading the name at the top once again, Eleanor Benson. Her name, her home, the house she had fought to keep, even when things had seemed impossible. The house that was now under siege by the very people she had always tried to help. A bitter edge of anger rose in her chest, but it was quickly tempered by something else. I won't let them undermine me, she thought. She had spent her whole life letting people walk over her because she didn't want to rock the boat. But now it was different. This house was hers, and she wasn't going to let anyone take it from her, not without a fight. Her phone buzzed, cutting through her thoughts. It was a text from Paul. I've prepared the letter. It'll make your legal standing clear. Let me know when you're ready to send it. Ellie felt a surge of both relief and anticipation. She quickly replied, send it, I'm ready. The moment she hit send, a sense of empowerment washed over her. The document she held, the one Paul had drafted, wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a shield, a way to claim back her life. She wasn't just going to stand by and let Liam and Rachel push her around. She had the power to stop them, and now she was ready to use it. She imagined the moment when she would hand them the letter, the look on their faces when they realized they couldn't simply make decisions about her life without her consent. Ellie stood up, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders, but this time it wasn't a burden. It was a responsibility. She wasn't going to let them believe they could take everything from her, not her home, not her autonomy. The evening light filtered in through the window, casting a soft glow on the room. For a moment, Ellie stood still, just looking out at the world beyond her walls. It seemed so peaceful outside, so quiet, but inside the storm was still brewing. She could feel it deep in her bones, the weight of the confrontation to come. She walked to the window, gazing out at the garden she had nurtured over the years, her thoughts moving like a river flowing toward what came next. She wasn't just defending a house. She was defending herself, defending her right to make decisions about her own life, her own future. As she turned back to the desk, she picked up the letter from Paul, holding it like a promise. The next move was hers. She felt that familiar stir of determination in her chest. She was ready. And as she folded the letter, tucking it into the envelope, she knew the hardest part of this battle was about to begin. The letter wasn't just a document. It was a declaration of war, and she wasn't going to back down. Ellie sat at her desk, the weight of the pen in her hand grounding her as she stared at the blank page before her. The letter she had to write wasn't easy, but it had to be done. She had just taken the first step by drafting it, and now she had to make sure it sent the right message. Dear Liam and Rachel, I wanted to address our recent conversation about renting out my room. After giving it some thought, I must say that I do not agree with this plan. The house is mine, and I need to make decisions about what happens here. I understand that you're facing financial challenges, but I believe there are other ways to address them without changing the nature of this house. I would appreciate it if we could find a solution that respects my wishes. Let's discuss this further soon. Best. Eleanor Benson. Ellie paused, reading the words over and over. She knew the tone was firm but not cruel. She wasn't angry, she was simply standing her ground. This is my home, she thought as she folded the letter carefully, the decision now solidified. There was no going back, but Ellie felt an unexpected calm. This was the moment when things would change. She sealed the letter in an envelope and for a moment just sat there holding it in her hands. The house was hers, paid off, secured under her name. She had always kept her financial independence quiet, not sharing much with Liam and Rachel. Perhaps she thought that had been part of the problem. They had always seen her as the benevolent grandmother, always willing to help, but they didn't know just how much she had. The sound of her phone buzzed, bringing her back to the present. Liam's name flashed on the screen and she hesitated. He had clearly felt the tension between them, and now he was reaching out. Is everything okay? You've seemed a bit distant lately. Let me know if you need anything. Ellie stared at the text for a moment, then responded with the simplest reply she could muster, let's talk. She set the phone down and exhaled slowly, feeling the gravity of the moment. There was no turning back now. She had sent the letter and the next move would be a confrontation. But Ellie was ready. She knew it wouldn't be easy, and Liam's reaction was likely to be one of frustration or confusion, but she was prepared. Her mind wandered to Paul, her trusted lawyer, and how he had reassured her just days ago. She needed to be firm, but she also needed to be smart. She had already given him a heads-up about the situation, and now she was going to take the next step. Picking up the phone, Ellie dialed Paul's number. She needed his advice before the meeting with Liam. The call rang for a moment before Paul's calm voice answered. "Ellie, what's going on?" "I've sent the letter," she said, her voice steady, but there was a quiet tension there too. "I'm meeting with Liam soon, and I want to make sure I'm handling this the right way. I don't want to make things worse, but I need to make sure I'm protected." "You're doing the right thing," Paul replied, his voice warm with reassurance. "Stand firm, but be clear. You have every right to refuse them. If this goes further, we'll have the documents ready to back you up." Ellie nodded even though he couldn't see it. "Thanks, Paul. I just don't want to escalate things if I don't have to." "You won't, Ellie," Paul said confidently. "You're simply standing up for yourself. Don't let them convince you otherwise." After hanging up, Ellie took a deep breath. She had done what she needed to do. The letter was out, and the conversation with Liam was looming. She wasn't sure how he would react, but she knew one thing: she was no longer the passive participant in her own life. This was her home, her space, and she was going to fight for it. As she tucked the letter into her bag, ready to send it, Ellie felt a surge of resolve. The battle had started, and she wasn't going to back down. Ellie's heartbeat echoed in her ears as the doorbell rang. She had expected this moment, but the reality of it still made her pulse quicken. Liam was here. She stood still for a moment, taking a breath before moving to answer the door. There was no turning back now. Liam stood on the porch, his posture tense, eyes narrowed slightly as if he were preparing for a difficult conversation. His usual relaxed demeanor was replaced with a hint of frustration. He'd come here with one purpose: to change her mind. "Grandma," he said, his voice softer than usual but carrying an edge. "I got your letter, but we need to talk. You don't really mean this, do you?" Ellie stepped aside, allowing him into the living room. She felt the weight of his gaze but didn't let it shake her. This was her home. She had every right to make this decision. "I mean it, Liam," Ellie said, her voice firm but calm. "I don't want to rent out the room. This is my house, and I make the decisions about what happens here, not you." Liam's expression faltered for a split second, but he quickly recovered. "Grandma, you don't understand. This is for your own good. We're just trying to help. Renting out the room will make everything easier. You won't even notice the extra person." Ellie's resolve didn't waver. "I'm not going to give up my space, Liam. This house is mine, and I don't want anyone living here but me." Liam's frustration grew. "You're being stubborn. We've been talking about this, Rachel and I. It'll help with the bills. We're doing this because we care about you." Ellie felt a rush of irritation. Care about me? She had spent years supporting them, offering a place to stay, always bending to their needs. But now, when she needed to stand her ground, they assumed she would simply agree. "No," Ellie said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. "This isn't about what's best for me, it's about what's best for you, and I'm not giving up my room, not for anyone." Liam opened his mouth to argue again, but Ellie held up a hand to stop him. She was done explaining. This wasn't a negotiation anymore, it was a stand. "I've made my decision," Ellie continued, "and I'm not changing it." She walked to her desk, grabbed the envelope with the letter Paul had prepared, and handed it to Liam. His eyes flickered to the letter, and he hesitated before taking it, unfolding it slowly. The silence between them stretched, heavy and tense, as he scanned the document. "Grandma," Liam began, his voice low with disbelief, "what is this?" Ellie stood her ground. "This letter makes it clear that this house is legally mine. I'm not giving it up. I'm not renting out my room, and I won't be manipulated into doing something I don't want to." Liam stood frozen, staring at the letter in his hands, unable to process what she was saying. Before he could speak again, Rachel rushed into the room, her face flushed with anger. "What's going on?" Rachel demanded, her voice sharp. "This isn't just about the room, Ellie. This is about helping you. Why are you being so stubborn?" Ellie didn't flinch. She faced Rachel with the same quiet strength. I'm not being stubborn, I'm standing up for myself. This is my home and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. Liam's jaw tightened as he processed her words. Ellie could see the struggle in his eyes, the conflict between his desire to help and his realization that she wasn't going to bend. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but Ellie didn't let her speak. You may think I'm old, but I'm not out of touch with reality, Ellie said, her voice cutting through the air with authority. I know exactly what's going on here. I'm not letting you take control of my life. Liam's shoulders slumped, his eyes meeting Ellie's with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Rachel stood beside him, her face tight, but Ellie didn't flinch. She wasn't going to back down, not this time. The silence in the room was thick, heavy with the realization that this battle wasn't over, it had only just begun. But Ellie wasn't afraid anymore, she was ready. Ellie felt the tension ripple through the room as Liam's face reddened. He stood there, still holding the letter, staring at her with a mixture of disbelief and frustration. You're being unreasonable, Grandma, Liam finally snapped, his voice rising. We're just trying to help, you can't just keep acting like everything is fine when it's not. Ellie stood firm, her hands folded in front of her. She knew this moment would come, the pushback. She'd spent too long letting them make decisions for her, not anymore. I'm not being unreasonable, she said, her voice calm but strong. This is my home, Liam, I've worked hard for it, and I'm not letting you take control of it. Liam exhaled sharply, throwing the letter onto the coffee table with more force than necessary. This isn't just about you, Grandma, he said, his eyes narrowed. This is about making things easier for everyone, for you too, why can't you see that? Ellie's stomach churned, but she refused to show weakness. I don't need you to make decisions for me, I've always helped you both, but this time I'm making the decision, and it's no. Liam's face darkened. You're just being stubborn, this is for your own good and you're turning your back on us. Enough, Liam, Ellie said firmly, cutting him off. I've made my decision, you don't get to dictate what happens in my home, this is my space and I won't let you manipulate me into giving it up. At that, Rachel, who had been standing quietly in the background, finally stepped forward, her voice dripping with impatience. This is just a refusal to accept help, Ellie, she said, her tone sharp. You're pushing us away, making it harder than it has to be, we're just trying to help you. Ellie's resolve didn't waver, she met Rachel's gaze, her expression unwavering. I'm not refusing help, I'm refusing to be told what to do with my own life. You've assumed I need your help, but I don't, not like this. Liam huffed, rubbing his hands over his face in frustration. There's gotta be a middle ground, he muttered. We can't just keep going in circles, you're being difficult on purpose. No, I'm not being difficult, Ellie replied, her voice firm. I'm standing up for myself. I've spent my whole life bending for others, this time I'm not giving in. Liam opened his mouth to argue further, but Ellie raised her hand to stop him. She was done. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. I've said all I'm going to say, Ellie continued, her voice calm but resolute. I'm not renting out the room, and I'm not changing my mind. The silence that followed was thick and charged, but Ellie didn't move. She wasn't going to back down. Liam clenched his fists, his frustration apparent, but Ellie could see the cracks in his confidence. He had always assumed she would give in. He was wrong. Rachel looked between them, her expression hardening. This isn't over, she said, her voice cold. You'll regret this, you're making a mistake. Ellie's heart didn't race anymore, she was past that. Maybe, she said quietly, but I'm the one making it, not you. With that they left, the door shutting behind them with a soft thud. Ellie stood in the silence, her body still, her mind racing. She had said what needed to be said, but she knew this was just the beginning. They would come back at her again and again. But she was ready. She walked slowly to her room, the weight of what had just happened settling over her like a thick fog. She had done the right thing, but this wasn't over. She knew they wouldn't let it go, and she wasn't sure what was coming next, but she was ready for it. Ellie sat at her kitchen table, the form in front of her heavy with finality. She had just completed it, the formal document declaring her legal ownership of the house and asserting her rights. It was more than just a piece of paper. It was her defense, her declaration. It was the first concrete step in reclaiming control of her own life. Her pen hovered over the signature line for a moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had been through so much to keep this house after Frank passed away, and now it felt like she was fighting to keep a piece of herself. This wasn't just about a room, it was about taking back what was rightfully hers. With a deep breath, she signed the document and slid it into the envelope. The seal clicked shut and Ellie sat back, looking at the envelope like it was a small but crucial piece of armor. The doorbell rang and Ellie's heart skipped. She knew who it was, Rachel. After their last confrontation, she could feel the storm brewing on the other side of the door. The tension had been palpable, but Ellie was ready. There would be no more caving in. Rachel stepped into the room without waiting for an invitation, her expression sharp and defensive. "Ellie," she said coldly, "we need to talk." Ellie stood, her posture straight, the envelope still in her hands. "I'm not changing my mind, Rachel. This house is mine and I'm not giving up my room." Rachel's eyes flickered to the envelope, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You're being unreasonable," she said, her voice strained. "We're just trying to help you, you're not thinking clearly." Ellie's chest tightened, but she remained composed. She had heard this all before, the subtle accusations, the undermining, but this time it wasn't going to work. "I'm thinking perfectly clearly, this is my decision to make and I won't let anyone make it for me." Rachel scoffed, her hands placed firmly on her hips. "You're refusing help, you're acting out of pride, you can't keep living in denial, Ellie, we're just trying to make things easier for you." Ellie took a step forward, meeting her daughter-in-law's gaze with unwavering determination. "I'm not denying anything, Rachel, I'm making my own choices. I've spent years helping you and Liam, but this is different. This is about me, my space, my home." Rachel stepped back slightly, eyes narrowing. "You don't understand what we're doing for you, you're too old for this, you can't handle these decisions on your own." The sting of Rachel's words hit Ellie harder than she expected, but she pushed the hurt down. She had heard these attempts to discredit her before, but this time they wouldn't work. Not now. "I'm perfectly capable, Rachel," Ellie said, her voice sharp and calm. "I've made this decision with a clear mind and I'm not backing down." Rachel didn't respond immediately. She opened her mouth, then closed it again as if she was weighing her next move. Ellie felt a brief flicker of triumph, but she knew this wasn't over. Rachel wouldn't give up easily. The silence was heavy and finally Rachel spoke again, her voice quieter. "This is your choice, but I hope you realize you're pushing us away. You're going to regret this." Ellie didn't flinch. "Maybe, but I'm the one making that choice, not you." As Rachel left, Ellie exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly. She had made her stand, and now the next step would be to see if Liam would come around or if this battle would drag on further. She picked up the phone and called Paul, her trusted lawyer. "It's time," she said simply. "Send the papers, I'm ready." As Ellie hung up, the weight of the situation settled over her, but for the first time in days she felt a sense of peace. This was her fight and she was ready for whatever came next. Ellie sat at the head of the dining table, the legal documents neatly arranged before her. She felt the weight of the situation settle heavily in her chest. This wasn't just about a room, it was about her independence, her autonomy. The house had been hers for so long and now she had to defend it, not just from strangers but from her own family. Liam and Rachel arrived together, their faces set with a mixture of determination and apprehension. The tension was palpable as they stood in the doorway, clearly expecting Ellie to back down, to give in to their pressure. Ellie stood, offering no pleasantries. She had no intention of sugarcoating this moment. "I'm glad you're here, let's get this over with." Liam spoke first, his voice strained. "Grandma, this has gone far enough. We've tried to be patient, but you're being unreasonable. We're only trying to help you." Ellie didn't flinch, keeping her voice steady. "I'm not being unreasonable, Liam. I'm standing up for myself." Rachel crossed her arms, her eyes narrowed. "You're refusing help, Ellie. Why can't you just accept that we're doing what's best for you? We've talked about this. The bills, the space, it's all for your own good." Ellie exhaled slowly, her calmness a stark contrast to the growing tension. "This isn't about what's best for me, Rachel. This is about control. You think that because I'm older I don't have the right to make decisions about my own life. But I do. This is my home and I decide what happens here." Liam's face flushed. You're just being stubborn, Grandma. We've been talking about this for months. It's a good solution. Why are you making it so difficult? Ellie met his gaze, unwavering. Because I don't want to feel like a burden. I've spent my life helping you both, but I am not going to be treated like someone who needs to be taken care of. This is my choice. Rachel's frustration boiled over. You're turning down our help because of pride. You're pushing us away for no reason. Ellie leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but firm. Trust is earned, not demanded, Rachel. I'm not refusing your help. I'm refusing to let you decide my life for me. This isn't about pride, it's about my independence. I've earned it. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but Ellie didn't give her the chance. She slid the envelope across the table to Liam, the legal documents inside a symbol of her resolve. I've made my decision. This house is mine and I'm not renting out the room. This is legally my right and I'm not backing down. Liam hesitated, his eyes scanning the document with confusion. You really think we're going to let this go like this? His voice was soft, almost unsure now. Ellie's heart didn't race. She was calm, more composed than she had ever been in the face of their pressure. You have a choice, Liam. You can either respect my decision or you can keep pushing, but I'm not going to change my mind. Rachel stood up, shaking her head in disbelief. You'll regret this, Ellie. You're pushing us away. You're making a mistake. Ellie stood as well, looking Rachel in the eye. Maybe I'll regret it, but I'll be the one to live with that decision, not you. I'm doing this for my own peace of mind. Liam finally spoke, his voice quiet but thoughtful. I didn't realize it meant this much to you, Grandma. The words hung in the air, a shift in the dynamic that Ellie hadn't expected. For the first time, it seemed like Liam was beginning to see things from her perspective. The room fell silent as Rachel looked between the two of them, the frustration still lingering, but with a new understanding, something that Ellie hadn't seen in her eyes before. Ellie wasn't sure what would happen next. The confrontation wasn't over, but she had said what needed to be said. She wasn't going to back down, no matter how many times they tried to convince her. The silence that followed was charged with emotion, but Ellie stood firm, ready for whatever came next. She had taken control, and now the next move was theirs. The tension in the room was palpable, but Ellie held her ground. Liam and Rachel stood before her, still processing the legal papers she had handed over. The silence lingered, thick with frustration, but also the quiet realization that Ellie wasn't going to back down this time. Liam shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the anger in his eyes slowly replaced by confusion. Grandma, he began, his voice softer than before, I didn't know it meant this much to you. I thought we were just helping. Ellie met his gaze calmly, not moving from her position at the table. I know you thought you were helping, she said, but this isn't just about the room. This is about my life, and I want to make my own choices now. I'm not turning my back on you, but I won't let anyone take control of my home. Rachel, still standing, crossed her arms tightly, her frustration boiling over. You're making it impossible, Ellie. We're trying to make things easier for you. We're trying to make sure you're comfortable, and you're refusing us. Ellie's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. I'm not refusing you, Rachel. I'm refusing to be treated like I'm incapable of making my own decisions. I've spent my whole life giving, and I'm not asking for anything in return except for my independence. Rachel didn't respond. Right away, Ellie could see the flicker of realization in her eyes. Maybe she hadn't understood before, but now the sharpness in her expression softened. For the first time in the conversation, Rachel seemed to pause and reflect. Liam, still holding the papers, turned toward Rachel, his brow furrowed. I think maybe we've been pushing too hard. His voice was quiet, but there was a clear shift in his tone. We've always assumed she needed us, but maybe we've been too focused on what we think is best. She's not asking for help, she's asking for respect. Ellie's chest tightened, but she didn't let herself show any sign of vulnerability. She kept her gaze steady, waiting for them to process it fully. This wasn't about pride, it was about finding a way forward without the constant pressure. Rachel glanced from Liam to Ellie, her face softening, though still guarded. You really don't want to be a burden, do you? She asked quietly, almost as if searching for confirmation. Ellie stood and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden she had tended to for years. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm. I've spent my life making sure everyone else was okay, but I've reached a point where I want to make sure I'm okay too. I don't want to be treated like someone who's incapable of making their own choices." The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling over them. Liam and Rachel exchanged a brief look, and for the first time, Ellie saw something shift. Maybe they were beginning to understand. Liam broke the silence, his voice quieter now. "We didn't mean to push you, I thought this was easier for everyone, but I see now that it's not." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "We've been wrong, I just want what's best for you, Grandma." Ellie's heart softened slightly, but she didn't relent. "What's best for me is being able to live my life the way I choose, and that means not having decisions made for me. I've made this choice, and I need you to respect it." Rachel sighed, uncrossing her arms. "I guess we've been a little forceful," she admitted, her voice less defensive now. "But I understand now, it's not about the room, it's about you needing space to live your life the way you want." Ellie nodded slowly, her resolve firm. "Exactly, I don't need to justify my decisions. This is my home, my life, and I will decide how it goes." The shift in the room was subtle but undeniable. Liam was no longer on the defensive, and Rachel's frustration seemed to melt away, replaced by a begrudging respect. As they left, Ellie felt the weight of the moment settle on her. This wasn't the end, but it was a step forward. She had made her point. They were beginning to see her strength, even if they hadn't fully understood it before. The battle wasn't over, but Ellie was no longer the one fighting alone. For the first time, she felt like her family was starting to respect her decision, and she would stand firm no matter where it led. The days that followed the meeting with Liam and Rachel were quieter than Ellie had expected. The house, which had once felt heavy with unspoken tension, now seemed like a refuge. Ellie found herself relishing the peace she had so long been denied. The quiet hum of daily life, the routine of tending her garden, reading in her favorite armchair, and enjoying her independence, each moment now felt like a small victory. One afternoon, as she sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, her phone rang. The caller ID flashed with Liam's name. Ellie's heart skipped a beat, but she answered with calm resolve. "Grandma," Liam's voice came through, hesitant but softer than before. "I've been thinking a lot. I realize I've been pushing too hard. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have tried to make decisions for you. You're right. You've earned the right to make your own choices." Ellie's chest tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I appreciate your apology, Liam, but I need you to respect my decision. I'm not going to apologize for wanting my independence." "I understand now," Liam said quietly. "I've just been trying to help, but I see that I've been wrong. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had no choice." Ellie paused, allowing the words to settle. She wasn't ready to fully forgive him yet. The damage had been done, but the sincerity in his voice made her believe he was beginning to understand. "I'm not asking for anything in return, Liam. I just want respect. My choices are mine to make." Liam's voice softened. "I get it now, Grandma. I won't push anymore." As the call ended, Ellie exhaled deeply. A weight seemed to lift, but she remained cautious. The healing was still new, fragile, but it was there. A small shift, but one that had the potential to grow. The next day, Rachel called. Her voice was quieter than usual, more vulnerable. "Ellie," she began, "I've been thinking about everything too. I didn't realize how much I was pushing you. I'm sorry for that. I should have respected your decisions from the start." Ellie's heart softened, but she remained measured. "I'm not angry, Rachel. I just need you to understand that this is my life to live, not anyone else's." Rachel sighed. "I do understand now. I was too focused on what I thought was best. I'm sorry." Ellie nodded, though Rachel couldn't see it. "It's not about being sorry, it's about respect. You don't need to fix anything, just respect my choices." The conversation ended with a tentative peace, but Ellie felt the smallest shift within her. She wasn't ready to trust completely, but for the first time, it felt like her family was beginning to see her as someone capable of making her own decisions. As the days passed, Ellie enjoyed the small moments, tending to her garden, sitting by the window, or simply enjoying a cup of tea in the stillness of her home. She had reclaimed her space and with it, her peace. Though the healing was slow, Ellie felt something she hadn't in a long time: freedom. She wasn't sure where the future would lead, but for the first time in years, she was finally in control. Ellie stood in the center of her living room, looking around at the small changes she had made over the past few months. The house, which once felt suffocating with tension, was now a reflection of her true self. Soft colors painted the walls, family photos now lined the shelves in frames she had carefully chosen. Every corner felt like a deliberate expression of her peace, of the life she had reclaimed. Liam and Rachel still visited, but there was a quiet understanding now. Ellie no longer felt like she had to walk on eggshells or justify every decision. Liam, after his apology, would drop by to help with small repairs, fixing a door or a loose window. His visits were brief, but the relationship felt more like equals, not a grandparent being pushed around. Rachel came over sometimes, too, though Ellie felt no pressure to entertain or make excuses. Their conversations had become more relaxed, without the underlying tension they once shared. Over tea, they'd talk about the children or the weather, the conversation no longer weighed down by the need to control or manipulate. Ellie's life extended beyond her family. She reconnected with old friends, many of whom she hadn't spoken to in years. They met for coffee, went for walks in the park, or sat in the garden she had begun to care for more deeply. Each conversation was like a breath of fresh air, a reminder of the life she had been too busy to enjoy before. She also took up a writing project, something she had put off for years. It became a way for Ellie to reflect on the past, to understand how she had been shaped by her choices. Every word she wrote brought her closer to understanding the strength that had always been inside her, even when she had felt powerless. The garden flourished with the care Ellie gave it. Flowers that had once been neglected now bloomed with life. She spent hours in the sun, planting new buds, trimming old ones, watching the seasons change with a new sense of calm. Ellie didn't need to explain her decisions anymore. She had reclaimed her space, her time, her life. She was no longer apologizing for the choices she made. If others didn't understand, that was their problem, not hers. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ellie sat by her window, sipping tea. The quiet of the house wrapped around her like a warm blanket. She had learned to enjoy the stillness, to find peace in the small, everyday moments. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of someone else's expectations pushing down on her. The house, her home, was no longer just a place. It was a sanctuary, a place where Ellie could finally thrive, living life on her own terms. Ellie had grown used to the quiet. In fact, it had become her refuge, her sanctuary. The house, which had once echoed with the demands of others, now felt like her own peaceful domain. The soft sunlight streamed through the windows in the morning, casting a gentle glow over the walls she had carefully painted and the furniture she had handpicked. Each room reflected the person she had become, strong, independent, and free. Liam and Rachel still visited, but their presence no longer loomed over her like it once did. Their visits were infrequent, and Ellie welcomed them with a calmness she hadn't expected. They came not with an agenda but as guests, no more pushing, no more subtle manipulation. Ellie had made her boundaries clear, and they had learned to respect them. The conversations, though brief, were no longer fraught with tension. She could feel the difference. The space between them had grown, and Ellie wasn't afraid of it. Her time, once so often spent worrying about what others needed, was now her own. Ellie filled her days with simple pleasures, sipping tea by the window, tending to her garden, and enjoying the quiet stillness of her home. There was no rush, no urgency, just a deep sense of contentment in the solitude she had chosen for herself. Ellie had recently joined a local book club. At first, she hadn't been sure about it, too much socializing, too much effort. But when she went to the first meeting, something inside her clicked. She had forgot how much she loved reading, how much she enjoyed discussing a story, discovering new perspectives. The club meetings became something she looked forward to. There were no expectations, no pressure to be anyone other than herself. Just like the quiet in her home, the conversations in the club felt freeing. No one was telling her how to think, what to do, or how to feel. She also began to write. At night, she would sit at her small desk, the dim light from the lamp casting a soft glow across the pages of her journal. It was a place to explore her thoughts, to process the years of silence and decisions made for her. She found that writing allowed her to reflect on the path she had taken and the strength it had taken to get here. As the seasons changed outside her window, Ellie's garden flourished. She had planted flowers that reminded her of her youth: roses, lavender, daisies. The blooms filled her days with color and fragrance. The act of caring for them, of watching them grow, felt like an extension of the growth she had experienced herself. She wasn't just tending to plants, she was nurturing her own spirit, allowing it to flourish in the space she had carved out for herself. Though the house was quieter now, Ellie didn't feel lonely. She had everything she needed within the walls of her home: the solitude, the freedom, and the space to breathe. There were no expectations, no obligations. She didn't need to answer to anyone. One evening, as the sun began to set and the soft glow of twilight filled the room, Ellie sat by the window, her journal in her lap. The world outside was still, and so was she. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. This was her life now, and she had reclaimed it fully. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving in the space she had fought for. Ellie wrote one final line in her journal: "This is the life I've always wanted." And for the first time, she knew she had it: peace, independence, and the freedom to live on her own terms. The phone rang late one afternoon, the familiar tone cutting through the stillness of Ellie's peaceful sanctuary. Her hand hovered over the receiver for a moment before she picked it up, knowing instinctively who was calling. "Grandma, it's Liam," his voice came through, quieter than usual, tinged with a kind of vulnerability that Ellie hadn't heard before. Ellie sat down in her favorite armchair by the window, the soft afternoon sun warming her face as she listened to his words. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, the weight of the apology that had been long overdue. "I know I've already said this before, but I just want to say it again. I'm sorry," Liam said, his voice trembling slightly. "I was wrong, Grandma. I pushed too hard. I tried to control things when I had no right to. You've always been there for me, and I should have respected your space. I see that now. I'm sorry for everything." Ellie closed her eyes for a moment, taking in the words without feeling anger, without the usual rush of emotion that would have followed this kind of conversation in the past. She felt only a quiet understanding and acceptance. It was as if the anger she once held toward Liam had evaporated, replaced by a calmness that came from knowing the battle had already been fought and won. "I've heard you, Liam," Ellie said softly, her voice steady and free of bitterness. "And I appreciate your apology, but I need you to understand something. I've changed. I'm not the woman I used to be, the one who would bend and break for everyone. I've learned to stand up for myself." There was a silence on the other end of the line before Liam spoke again, his tone more earnest now. "I understand, Grandma, I really do. I've been selfish, not seeing what you needed. I see it now. I respect that you're doing what's best for you, even if it's not what I thought was right." Ellie smiled softly, the warmth in her chest spreading. "It's not about what's right for anyone else, Liam. It's about what's right for me. You don't need to apologize anymore, but you do need to respect my boundaries. I won't tolerate being manipulated or pressured again. I've earned my space, my independence, and I'm not giving it up." The words were simple, but they were final. Ellie wasn't saying them with anger or malice. She said them with a quiet strength, the kind of strength she had found in the months since she had taken control of her life. Liam paused before responding, and Ellie could almost hear the shift in his understanding. "I respect that, Grandma," he said finally. "I've always known you were strong, but I guess I never really saw it before. I'll respect your boundaries from now on, I promise." Ellie's heart swelled with some, ebbing close to relief, but also with the deep satisfaction of knowing that she no longer needed to justify her existence, her decisions. She had claimed her power, and no one could take it from her. "I'm glad to hear that, Liam," Ellie said, her voice calm. "And I'll be here when you're ready to visit, but I'm not going to chase anyone anymore. I've got my life to live, and I'm doing it on my terms." Liam's voice softened, and Ellie could feel the sincerity in his words. "I'm proud of you, Grandma, I really am, and I'm going to try to be better, I promise." As the conversation ended, Ellie sat in silence for a moment, the phone still pressed against her ear, listening to the quiet hum of her house. It felt like a door had closed, but one that had been long overdue. It wasn't just a conversation. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the last step toward full freedom. The phone call marked a turning point for Ellie. For the first time, she realized that her family, her son, her grandson, and even Rachel, had begun to see her not as the passive matriarch they once took for granted, but as a woman in charge of her own destiny. They had learned in their own way to respect her decisions. There would be no more manipulation, no more control. They were seeing her strength, understanding that her life, her choices were hers alone to make. And as Ellie placed the phone back in its cradle, she felt a quiet sense of completion. She was done with the struggle. The battles were behind her, and now she could finally move forward unencumbered by anyone's expectations. She looked around the room, taking in the peace that surrounded her. Her life was hers again, fully and completely, and Ellie knew that no one could take that from her. As she closed her eyes and let the quiet settle around her, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was her time, and she would make the most of it. The future was hers to embrace, and for the first time in years, Ellie knew she was free. Ellie returned from her trip feeling lighter, as if the weight of years had been shed from her shoulders. She had spent a week away walking the coastal cliffs, breathing in the salty air and letting the rhythm of the ocean wash over her. It had been a time for her to rediscover herself, to reconnect with the freedom she had fought for. Now, as she walked back into her home, the familiar walls didn't just feel like a place to live. They felt like a symbol of everything she had reclaimed. The house, still filled with the small touches she had carefully added over the months, was more than just a building. It was a living testament to her independence, to her strength, and to the life she had created on her terms. Ellie smiled as she stood in the doorway, the sunlight streaming through the windows. She had done it, she had built this sanctuary, and now it was hers completely. Her time away had given her a new perspective, a renewed sense of purpose. She returned to the book club with a fresh excitement, her journal full of reflections and ideas she had jotted down during her trip. The other members of the club had become a small circle of friends, each of them sharing their own stories, their own lives. Ellie found herself more involved now, not just as a participant, but as a contributor. They had started discussing the idea of writing a book of their own, a collective memoir of sorts, and Ellie felt a spark within her. She had always wanted to write her own story, but for so long she had been too afraid that no one would care, afraid of what might surface. But now the words flowed freely. She spent evenings at her desk, writing with a clarity and purpose she hadn't known she was capable of. The memoir started as a reflection of her past, her struggles, and her triumphs, but as the pages filled, Ellie began to see it as a way to share the lessons she had learned. She wasn't writing for anyone else, she was writing for herself. Her family had given her space, respecting her boundaries more than ever. Liam still visited occasionally, but there was no longer any pressure, no attempts to control or manipulate. Ellie had found her place as the matriarch on her own terms, and she had learned how to navigate those relationships with grace and strength. She had given them the space to grow, too, and she could feel the shift in their understanding of her. They no longer saw her as someone to manage or take care of, they saw her as someone who could stand on her own, who could make her own decisions and live her own life. Ellie had begun exploring new hobbies, things she had always put off in the past. She had taken up painting, an old passion from her youth, and spent hours in her studio, the brush gliding across the canvas, bringing to life the colors and shapes she had imagined for years. The act of creating, of expressing herself in this new way, felt like another step toward reclaiming her full self. And she found joy in it, pure joy that didn't come with it. Why guilt or obligation? Her home, once filled with tension, was now her haven. It wasn't just the walls that had changed, it was her. The space reflected her growth, her freedom. She looked around and saw not just a house, but a life she had carefully crafted, a life that had meaning and purpose, independent of anyone else's expectations. As Ellie sat at her desk, staring out the window at the garden she had nurtured, a thought occurred to her. The future was hers now, and she was no longer constrained by anyone's expectations or assumptions. She was free. The horizon seemed full of possibility. No longer weighed down by the past, Ellie was ready to embrace whatever came next. She didn't know exactly what that future would look like, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel afraid. With the faintest smile, Ellie picked up her pen and continued to write. She wasn't just telling her story, she was living it, and whatever came next, she knew she was ready for it. Ellie sat in her favorite chair, looking out the window as the sun dipped below the horizon. The soft orange and pink hues filled the sky, casting a warm glow on the house she had fought so hard to reclaim. The world outside was quiet, and inside, the peace she had worked for surrounded her. The house no longer felt like just a place to live. It felt like a reflection of everything she had overcome, everything she had rebuilt. The small touches she had added over the months, the new curtains, the freshly painted walls, the family photos she had carefully framed, reminded her of the strength she had found within herself. Every room in the house was hers, filled with memories of a life fully lived and decisions fully owned. Her family still visited from time to time, but there was a calmness between them now. They had stopped trying to push her, stopped trying to manage her life. Liam had learned to respect her boundaries, and Rachel, though still wary at times, had softened. Ellie had shown them that she no longer needed to be controlled, that she could stand firm in her decisions without feeling guilty. For so long, Ellie had bent to the will of others. She had felt the weight of their expectations, their assumptions, and their demands. But now, as she sat in the quiet of her home, she could feel the freedom in her chest. The years of manipulation, of compromise, had led her to this moment, the moment when she could finally say, without hesitation, that her life was her own. She had found a new rhythm in life. Ellie had joined the local book club, a small group of women who gathered to discuss literature, share their experiences, and simply enjoy each other's company. It had given her a sense of connection, of belonging, without the pressure of family ties that had once felt like a burden. She had also started writing again, chronicling her story, her struggles, and her triumphs. It was a way to process everything she had gone through and to celebrate the woman she had become. The quiet of her home now felt like peace. She could sit for hours in the garden, surrounded by flowers that she had planted with her own hands, watching them grow and bloom as she had. Her thoughts were no longer clouded with anxiety about what others expected of her. Ellie had created this space for herself, and in doing so, she had created the life she had always wanted. As she sat there, the house bathed in the golden light of the evening, Ellie smiled. The weight of the past had finally lifted. She was no longer the woman who had allowed herself to be controlled by others. She was no longer afraid to live on her own terms. For a moment, the world outside her window seemed to pause with her. The steady rhythm of life continued, but Ellie had finally found her place within it. She had taken control, and now nothing could take that from her. The phone buzzed with a message from Liam, but she didn't reach for it. She didn't need to respond. This moment, the peace she had created, was hers. And as the sun sank into the horizon, Ellie whispered to herself, a quiet thought but one filled with conviction. You thought you could take my space, but I've always been the one in charge. And for the first time, she knew it was true.